Hello and welcome to Movie Marathon Mood. It's a show where we watch a bunch of movies and then we talk about them. It's as simple as that. On this episode, it's our Christmas episode. We're talking Lethal Weapon, action classic. We're going to discuss the ways in which we also look at it as a Christmas classic, but it's also an excuse to start looking at the Lethal Weapon franchise. So we're talking Lethal Weapon 1 and 2 on this episode. It's all right here, a Movie Marathon Mood, which starts right now. I'm Jesse Gilstrap, joined by my comrade Drew Cordell. Merry Christmas, Drew.
Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, Jesse.
Indeed, tis the season. Tis the season for Lethal Weapon. Before we even talk about the first movie specifically, I just want to say that this franchise is one that I've grown up with. I think you have as well. That I first saw. I can't remember exactly what age, but let's say preteen, early teenage years, somewhere in that range. What's weird is the fourth movie came out whenever I was 14, and in my head, it's like I was already a fan of the franchise for a while, but there's no way it had been more than probably a few years. I probably
Right.
so it's kind of funny how that time works to a young person's brain specifically. It's like, oh yeah, that Lethal Weapon series that I love so much and have loved for such a long time that I first saw last year or something. Like who knows exactly the time frame that was for me. It probably been a few years, but still, I saw that fourth movie in the theaters, and of course, I don't want to skip ahead to that, but that was the only one got to see in the theater, and it was a fun time. Me, my sister, and my grandma watching Lethal Weapon 4. But this series has always been something special to me, and it's a pleasure to sit back down and revisit them because it's been a little while since I've seen them. But I do want to mention too something else. Years ago, I have my own blog and where I write a lot of reviews, and then you and I started to do something together.
Yeah.
Like we were going to try to do a collaborative blog, and I've done collaborative writings with people before, different ways that we've done that and been successful. But for whatever reason, we didn't finish
Right.
even starting on our blog, which was called The Mood. And I was always like in the back of my mind wanting to do it. It never quite happened, and now we've obviously been doing this for a little while now, quite a few
Yeah.
different movies and things that we've discussed. So we found a format that works for us. So that's good.
Yeah.
The idea finally became something and became movie marathon mood. But the thing that we tried to do was exactly this. It was Lethal Weapon.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome that here we are. I didn't even explicitly plan that from the start. I just thought it's Christmas time. Let's talk Lethal Weapon.
Right.
But uh, but here we are. It's still like a cool moment to kind of come back to something we tried before.
Yeah. And, I remember us, and I can't remember when we tried to do the blog. I think this is even separate from that. But I remember us marathoning the series together when we were roommates because I specifically remember watching Lethal Weapon 3
Yeah,
and us kind of just tearing it to shreds, which we'll get to do again.
yeah.
Uh, but
That's a
but
tease to the next episode.
yeah, but it's kind of weird because I don't want to say that Lethal Weapon is underrated because I don't think it is. I don't think that's an accurate description. I think it's very lauded. A lot of people over the years have praised it. It's one of those kind of semi rare times Ebert gave something 4 out of 4. Um, he did that a lot, but sometimes it feels like It's an accomplishment. Uh, one of the greatest critics of all time. Giving praise to the first one like that, and also, it's hard to call a series that has three sequels and now a television show
Yeah, which I haven't seen.
that's already done, and I haven't watched it either. And I've debated doing it, but just not sure if I will or not. But anyway, it's hard to say that's underrated, but in a way, I feel like people don't talk about Lethal Weapon as much as they do Die Hard, and I don't really understand why. Because, and not just in the question of Christmas, which is also an, a statement too. People don't talk about Lethal Weapon at Christmas when Lethal Weapon did the action movie at Christmas a solid year before Die Hard did. And also, I guess I'm going to make a controversial statement here, and I will back up my claim as we talk about the movie. But I feel like this movie, in a weird way, maybe not weird so much, but in a different way, I feel like this movie encapsulates the spirit of Christmas a lot more than Die Hard does.
Yeah.
Where Die Hard is just a fun action movie that takes place on Christmas, and it is great. It's one of the best action movies ever. If you made me pick which one I like more, it would really merely be preference, not really saying one's better than the other. Um, but because I love Die Hard also. Um,
Oh,
but
you almost said you like Die Hard too,
I know I
I
had to be really careful.
think.
Had to be really careful. But we'll probably eventually do Die Hard the series
But
maybe.
that means we have to watch A Good Day to Die Hard, which I have so far avoided.
Oh, you're lucky. I saw it in theaters. Um, but thankfully I barely remember it. So maybe that speaks more to it as well. But anyway, I feel like kind of the message of this movie is kind of finding the good in yourself and being at peace with yourself, and spreading that with the ones that you love, which maybe not just directly Christmas, but this holiday season. I can't think of anything that really kind of hits more at home with that, and that's very much in Lethal Weapon. But my original point was, I really don't hear people talk about Lethal Weapon as much as Die Hard, and I feel like there's just as many memorable lines. There's just as many great memorable action scenes. There's just as much a feel to it that's memorable. And I was going to say that you and I have always that's one of the mini series that we've always kind of shared in common, that we always go back to and talk about with each other, and it's gone through our friendship over all these years, and now here we are again. Like you said, we attempted to review this before in a different way, and now we're doing this on our show. So it's kind of been a long time coming.
Well, I think you've kind of loosely started to touch on it. We can move even more specifically straight into talking about the first Lethal Weapon.
He's a criminal's worst nightmare. A cop who enjoys the danger.
No guns, no jujitsu, just bring him down.
Do you really want to jump? Well, then that's fine with me. Come on.
Wait, what do you mean? Wait a minute. What the?
He was ready to retire. Now, he's gonna wish he had.
Gun! Oh, oh, oh.
Raj, meet your new partner.
New partner. Too old for this.
If these guys can just stand each other,
What you got in there?
4-inch Smith.
A lot of old timers carry those.
the bad guys don't stand a chance.
To begin things off, it is the one the Christmas movie, and just speaking a little bit more about what you said about Die Hard. I love Die Hard. Um, this isn't me wanting to trash Die Hard. We will probably talk about Die Hard at some point, like you said. So there's that. It's wonderful. It's great. I love watching it. I'm not going to complain about Die Hard, but it's also like it's one of those like perfect movies, and I don't just mean perfect in the sense of how much I enjoy it. I mean in a sense of its structure and its formula, right? And that's not a denigration either. Uh,
Right.
there's nothing wrong with formula done right, and you can practically see and feel the structure in Die Hard as you're watching it. Like, oh yeah, there's the ebb and flow of this movie. You can see the story building itself and the twists and turns at very solid points, and it's basically become its own type of movie. Die Hard on a or in a blank. It's become that. And
Yeah.
Lethal Weapon, on the other hand, not that it lacks structure. It definitely it has structure to it, but it has a feel to it that's kind of more naturalistic.
Yeah.
It's more more free flowing. Uh, it just kind of it's about its characters, and it can get messy in the sense of like things just kind of happen, like, and they happen immediately. Like there's no wasting time. It's
Right.
uh, the bad guys are already on their plot. There isn't a, and now let's establish what the bad guys are doing. It's like, oh no, they're doing stuff, and we just kind of run in there. It's like, oh hey, what's happening in here? And then Riggs and Murtaugh end up in the mix of things, and then the bad guys are like, we need to stop Riggs and Murtaugh, and they get real personal, like, and
Right.
go in for the attack hard and heavy, and it just happens that fast, and that's awesome. And I feel like obviously it's movies, and it's got plenty of the fantastic in it. It's not like it's striving for 100% realism, but what I like about that is it feels like life to me.
Yeah.
It has this kind of naturalistic flow that feels real. It feels authentic. It feels like family too at times. Like, and that's the Christmas thing as well. Is like it works as a Christmas movie because it's so much about family, and so much about these people, and I really appreciate that a lot. It's that redemption story without feeling cheap
Yeah.
or overly sentimental. It's I mean, the redemption arc includes a fight on a lawn.
Right.
It's like no, let's let them beat them up. Get them. Let's watch them beat them up. All the cops stand by. Let's just watch. And like,
Right.
and everybody's like, yeah, let them do it. Beat the shit out of them. Like it's fine. It's everybody's in on it, and but it works, and it works on an emotional level too. One of those stories I always loved is that Mel Gibson was hired to play Hamlet because of his performance holding the gun to his head.
Uh-huh.
And that was something that Zeffirelli saw, director saw him in Lethal Weapon and thought, I need that guy to play Hamlet. And that really says something. There's something more than just the typical action bravado in here. And of course, there's plenty that went along with the. I'll try not to talk too much about Die Hard, I promise, but Bruce Willis obviously has plenty of great actor moments as well
Yeah.
in Die Hard, and real authenticity in there as well that people saw that made them relate to him. Um, but Lethal Weapon gets to work with its ensemble. It has not just the buddy cop angle, but it feels like let's go hang out with the family, let's go have dinner with the family, and
Right.
and everybody's real with each other too. It's not just kind of a fake family. It feels like everybody can joke around. They can, for whatever reason, walk in on Murtaugh in a bathtub. It's never not been weird to me, but hey, uh, there's still something that feels like a genuine connection between them all at the same time. When his daughter, Roger's daughter, chides him for having a little gray in the beard, so he shaves his beard. You know, that's just fantastic,
Right.
and it's all there in the rhythm of the movie. It's worth mentioning too, real quick, the age thing, because um, when I was younger, I was never a judgy person about age, but still, you accept what you're told to some degree. And Murtaugh, Danny Glover's always too old for this shit.
Yeah.
That's always the thing for him. And he was actually 40, and his character is turning 50 at the beginning.
Right.
But he was actually 40, and I'm thinking, dude, like, you're too old for this. Come on, you're 40, and I'm 36 right now myself, mid 30s, not too far away, I guess, in a certain spectrum from approaching 40. But even saying so, like, there's never a time in my life where I saw 40 as old. I guess 40 is old to do some of the things they do in this movie,
Right.
but and I've also been a guy in my mid 30s looking at coworkers in their early 20s and thinking, boy, I'm different than these people. It's definitely something that's happened in one way or another. That's another thing you see is the police force. They have a real camaraderie,
Yeah.
and there's a real sense of life in there as well. I think this about me, which is that, like, I like all different kinds of stories and movies, and I have no problem with formula. I'm all over the place in terms of liking different genre types. But if I had to choose, if you had to say what's more me or more my style, and you were going to say something that's really formula or follows a structure, or something that's a little more free flowing, I think where I would fall.
Right.
and and for me, Lethal Weapon, like Die Hard, it's constantly mentioned as the Christmas classic. I've seen it more this year than ever before.
Yeah.
People saying, "Is it a Christmas movie? It is a Christmas movie. It's the best Christmas movie." Blah 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 blah. And like you said, Lethal Weapon it isn't precisely underrated, but you don't see it perennially come up
Right.
as often as Die Hard does. And so it kind of starts to feel like it's, kind of out of the discussion by comparison. And that's one of the many reasons I wanted to talk about Lethal Weapon here for Christmas, is because uh, it deserves its place in the conversation.
Yeah, and let me tell you why that it is more deserving of, a little more Christmas recognition. And this is something that Die Hard can't say. First off, this movie starts with Jingle Bell Rock, intercut with a prostitute getting high and jumping off a building. What is
With
more?
their top open and
Yes. um, you don't get more Christmassy than that. Uh, but no, it
with some
also
snow in her nose.
it it kind of sets up for the kind of movie you're gonna watch too, which is kind of the edginess of, not just Riggs' character, but the plot as a whole. Starting off like that, intercut with the, family friendly Christmas favorite, and kind of being, not that Murtaugh is, a saint or anything. I think he's a good man, but he's definitely a family man. and that's kind of the warm, cushy part of this at clash with Riggs being a loose cannon, and kind of having that start off like this, like with the that song, and then what happens next to kind of set everything in motion, or to kind of get us caught up in what's already been set in motion, really. And that goes to, in part, you got to give credit to Shane Black for writing a great script. Who he's a great writer. One of the best action writers probably of all time. I mean, he's had a few misses. Even if this were his only, hit, which it's definitely not. He's written several over the years, and he's gone on to write and direct some of his own films, some of which are also extremely good. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, The Nice Guys, specifically, those are both really good movies. But you also got to give credit to Richard Donner for directing this and knowing exactly the tone and exactly the way to bring this script to life. And it's just, you talk about the structural perfection of Die Hard, which I completely agree with you. But just the tonal choices of this movie were perfect. I think this movie is pretty much exactly, a lot of times there can be a great script and the movie doesn't match up with the writing because the director just didn't capture what was on the page, and that happens more often than not. And Lethal Weapon is one of those great examples of a director getting not only what's on the page, but bringing extra oomph with it and just making it work and making it crack. And the character of Riggs is great. I'm the same way. You kind of talked about if you're going to choose something that's great, a great formula, something that executes a formula perfectly, like Die Hard, or something that's more like this. I'm gonna prefer this because I think, not that John McClane, and I'm gonna try to stop talking about Die Hard after this, but not that John McClane doesn't have you right there with him. Like, he's a good character. I adore that movie, but there's something about Riggs and Murtaugh, and especially Riggs, that just connects with me on a deeper level. I think the characters here resonate more and are more kind of believable, and we also see them, in an extended period of time. It's not just like a moment, um, like one night trapped in a building like Die Hard. It's a different kind of thing, but I also kind of prefer that. I love seeing not only the juxtaposition of them as who they are, but seeing them on their own and seeing their own struggles and their own insecurities, and Riggs, his depression and apathy, and he's just such a renegade, but also just completely a mess. And I love the scene when he's doing the sting operation to buy that cocaine from the Christmas tree guy, because it's so funny and it's so kind of scary at the same time. His acting is so good, and hilariously, the actor that plays the final one of those guys, he has like the red flannel shirt, the one that has the gun on him at the end of that scene, is none other than the father of Anthony Kiedis, the lead singer of Red Hot Chili Peppers. It's a weird little trivia tidbit I picked up this time from IMDb, but his name is like Blackie Demet, but he changed his name to John Kiedis. And of course, Anthony Kiedis is his son. Just a weird little trivia bit, but that scene, just just him like counting out the $100 bills after that, there are the cash for 100 when they, clearly mean 100,000 for the cocaine, and he's playing dumb, and I just love that. And then the Three Stooges kind of comedy, um, the slapstick, with him poking him in the eye, and it gets crazy real fast. Like you said, when things start happening, they start happening quick. Jumps out with a shotgun, ends up hitting one of his own guys, and Riggs starts shooting up the place, and the last guy gets the gun on him, and Riggs just like, shoot us both, just kill us, whatever. And he when he gets the gun back and pointed at him, like, you really think, oh, he could just kill this guy at any minute. And you could see it in his face. He doesn't really care about anything, especially himself. And he's on a downward spiral. And we learned that his wife has died in a car crash, car accident. Maybe there's more to that. I don't know. We'll find out. But and he's been unable to cope with the loss. And Murtaugh is like insecure about his age. We see, very early on, and like you said, he's celebrating his 50th birthday. Bathtub, his whole family comes in there. It's really funny. And, of course, his daughter Rianne says something about his gray hair and his beard. And, he ends up shaving it, and he's talking to his partner, or his fellow friends, talking about being a sensitive 80s man. Just nice little bits, like the camaraderie's all there. And of course we because of Riggs's kind of instability, he gets pawned off to another department, and ends up being partners with Murtaugh. It's a good setup. This did not create the buddy action cop movie, but I do think it perfected it. There's not much that has come since this that I think is like in this realm. Only thing that I think may or may not, and I'm not even going to say better, but the only thing that comes since this, and I might be wrong, there might be something I'm not thinking of, but to me, it took all the way until like the first season of True Detective to like really capture like the perfection of the buddy cops. And it's a different thing. Like, True Detective is not just a buddy cop show. It's it's very dark. It's very much a mystery, but their relationship is at the center of it, and is a lot of the what makes it so good. But yeah, this has stood alone for so long as like when someone says, "Hey, what's the best example of buddy cop or a buddy action film?" Well, I'm going to say this, and I still feel that way. It's just the dynamics between these two characters of what makes this so good, and the plot is pretty good too. I think it's interesting that they're both Vietnam veterans, and that's kind of it's really kind of a thread that works for the story too, because Riggs is special forces, or ex special forces, and a lot of the guys in this operation, the drug operation, are former special forces guys. So Riggs has an understanding of what they're capable of as we go along through the case and figure out what's going on, what kind of weaponry is used, who could possibly be using that kind of weaponry, like the explosive device when they blow up that girl's house. That really hilarious scene with those kids that they're interviewing. Uh, but I enjoy that part of it, and of course, um, the man that's daughter died at the beginning in the opening scene is uh, none other than played by none other than Tom Atkins, who is a great kind of character actor. Has been in a bunch of kind of underappreciated films from the 80s and uh, 90s and all over the place. I really like Tom Atkins, and I like him in this kind of playing Hunsaker, who's an old war buddy of Murtaugh's, and at first it kind of seems like he's genuinely concerned about the death of his daughter, and which he is, but he's hiding the fact that he was part of this whole operation, and he ends up telling Murtaugh, and of course he ends up getting killed. And it throws both of these two in this whole plot because now Colonel McAllister, um, played by Mitchell Ryan, who's really good at kind of this very calm, matter of fact, really cool villain. Like not really a typical villain for these kind of movies. He's a little bit older, but I like his. I kind of like his presence in this. He doesn't do too much, but the scenes he has, he's really cool. And I mean, of course, his henchman, Mister Joshua, played by none other than Gary Busey, and I really like him in this. Again, you want to talk about instability? We could just talk about Gary Busey's like real life. Um, but someone who can inhibit like an a completely unstable character to be like Riggs's arch enemy, you went perfect with Gary Busey at his in his prime. And I really enjoyed him in this. I think he's a really good villain. I love the fight at the end. There's just so many, so many great things. You mentioned the family. I love Murtaugh's family too. And I also like, of course, they do get involved with the plot a little bit because Rand ends up getting kidnapped, and they go to save her. And like you said, they make it pretty personal really quick, and it opens up like for one of the best stretches of the movie because I love that whole shootout when they try to rescue her. I love the bit where they get captured and they're both getting tortured, and of course, they're getting tortured different ways. I saw this on TBS the first time I saw it,
Oh.
so I always assumed that Ghost Spit was like a TV edit, but I was delighted to to find out because I was like, "Oh, he clearly said something else." Like nobody would just say "Ghost Spit," um, but then years later, finally watch it, unedited or rated R version, theatrical cut, and to hear the glory of Danny Glover just going off, go spit, you son of a bitch. Like I love it. I love the dialogue in this movie. But I love that torture scene when he's kind of getting hit, and of course Riggs is getting the electroshock treatment. I always thought, 24 was always trying to up the ante on Lethal Weapon and never quite got there. Uh, yeah, I love 24 again, like one of my favorite shows ever. I love Jack Bauer, a great action character, but I think that scene when Riggs is getting tortured, I think it's one of the best examples. Even though it makes no sense that he's like at 200% when he gets done getting tortured and escapes and just starts, killing everybody. It doesn't matter. It's the energy of the movie. That's the kind of movie we're watching. You're completely swept up in it. I just love it, and there's just so many action scenes, and there's so many great scenes. I could go on and on and on. I just love this movie, and I mean it's an A plus for me. The, the thing I want to say before I kind of hinted off, get your thoughts. That I hinted at it, but this does kind of have that Christmas message in that Riggs is really at the brink, and you mentioned the scene where he's about to kill himself, and what's on the TV, but like a Looney Tunes Christmas Carol special, and you know in some ways you could just be like, oh, that's just what's on in the background, but I think it's intentional, and kind of see the journey that he goes on to find his own family, that he ends up considering Murtaugh not just a friend, but a brother, a family member, and that he is able to be at peace with himself at the end and is able to enjoy Christmas dinner with the Murtaughs. And I just really love that kind of feeling, and I feel like that's a little more Christmassy than just the whole Nakatomi thing happening on Christmas. You're at a Christmas party, but or Argyle listening to Run DMC Christmas music in the limo. Like, I love all that, and I said I was going to stop talking about Die Hard. I lied, but no, like I feel like there's a little, if you're looking for like a actual Christmas movie, this has a little more Christmas movie ish stuff in it than Die Hard does. Die Hard just kind of takes place around Christmas. I think that is a little bit of a difference. But no, this is A plus. I mean, just one of the best action movies ever. And I would, be remiss if I didn't mention Michael Kamen and well, Eric Clapton as well, for adding guitar and credited for the score as well. But I'm a huge fan of Michael Kamen. I think he kind of gets he's a little underappreciated. Uh, he passed away several years ago now, but he kind of gets overlooked, I think, because he did score so many like '80s action classics. But like, no, I don't really hear people talk about his scores that much. But I love the Lethal Weapon score. He also scored Die Hard. He also scored Highlander. He also scored, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, which is one of his best scores. He's just great. But there's just so much that I love about this movie. But I feel like, yeah, I mean, this is A plus, and it's just one of the best action movies ever made.
Talking about that torture scene, one of the things that I love about that when Riggs just goes crazy and starts killing everybody once he escapes, and it's just awesome. The energy of that. But what's also excellent about that is that they, probably intentionally avoid the trope of Murtaugh having to witness his daughter being tortured and then trying to get the information out of him that way.
Yeah,
It's like you think that's where they're going, and instead Riggs comes in like just
right.
and forget that. Like, we're back in the swing of things now. The energy of this movie is palpable, and it's fantastic. It works on the emotional, dramatic action level, but it also works comedically, and that mixture is perfect. I love the pieces, the scene where uh, he ends up they jump off the roof. Has that guy that's
Oh yeah,
he's pretending to be a good negotiator, but really he's just crazy enough to get the job done however he can. And he jumps off with the guy, which of course is crazy to jump off with somebody handcuffed to him.
right.
Now, that would do some serious damage if you were handcuffed to somebody and jumped off a roof. And no matter what type of cushion you landed on, like, the force would be pretty crazy. Might break your wrist or
Right,
something, like,
right,
or at least tear into you. But it works in the movie. That's part of the fantasy level you accept. But speaking of the drama that does work, is when Murtaugh pulls him aside afterward, and Rig pulls the trigger, and it's just enough raw nerve that you can just see an understanding building between these characters. There's a lot that happens without them needing to go into great detail on it. Like they don't need to have too much pause. You can just see these guys starting to understand each other
Right.
as the movie goes. It doesn't need to linger on it. It's instinct. And that's and Riggs' journey throughout the movie works partially because you don't have to delve into it too far at points. It's just you get the planes, trains, and automobiles sequence at the end where he comes. It's like, oh no, I don't want to go to dinner, and he
Right.
of course gets roped into the dinner. But uh, that scene where they're around the pool and Murtaugh's like, is anybody you ever met not get killed?
Yeah, yeah.
That whole spiel, that whole sequence, which is already funny because it's like, I don't know if that's precisely Briggs's problem that everybody ends up being killed, but obviously he's just exaggerating a thesis on Briggs's personality. But then he ends up having to have that upended when uh, the guy needs to be shot and killed.
Right.
uh, Greater action needs to be taken than just shooting him in the leg. Um, which just kind of works in the movie's favor in so many ways in terms of, again, a thesis on what type of action does or doesn't need to be taken and how these characters behave in the moment. It works really well. I love Mel Gibson in this movie, but I also love Danny Glover.
Yeah.
He's just utterly fantastic. And uh, like, as much as I could also talk about Gary Busey and all the bad guys in the movie and different ways that they pop, it like, the thing that works for this movie and the primary focus isn't the villains, it's
Right.
our heroes and their journey and what they experience going through this. So I really appreciate that. Damn it, I'm going to do it again talking about Die Hard, because obviously Die Hard has one of the all-time great villains with Alan Rickman, and
Yeah.
would trade that for the world. Um, I don't know how that would necessarily work in an Lethal Weapon dynamic, and that's something special that Die Hard has. But just to pass on a little unnecessary credit in the middle of a Lethal Weapon review, but like, but we don't need it in Lethal Weapon.
Right.
We have plenty, and it's not like the villains are uninteresting.
Yeah.
It's just that the movie's focus is intently on these guys um, who aren't just superheroes. They're very flawed people. And I'm always going to fall for the character side of things, seeing people that have something you can relate to. Because I think there's something to relate to in both Riggs and Murtaugh, because Murtaugh isn't flawed in the same way or to the same extremity that Riggs is,
Right.
but he has his own insecurities and he
Yeah.
has his own issues that he has to deal with. And I think Riggs balances some of that out in him too, helps him cut loose a little bit. Not just cut loose, but start to feel more secure in himself at
Yeah.
times too. Like he, as much as Riggs might show him up at the range, like they still know how to balance each other out. And Murtaugh brings that energy with him too into the fights. That's something that I think works really well.
Yeah. He cracks that neck before he takes a shot. Um,
Yeah.
you know, and I gotta correct a mistake. I said Colonel McAllister, General McAllister. He says General McAllister. Time to die. Just a great. I love that scene when he shoots shoots the driver of McAllister's car. It flips, explodes, and then later says something about General McAllister's roasting his nuts on Hollywood Boulevard. Just, one of the funnier lines from the movie, and but also kind of like Murtaugh, kind of getting his groove back, kind of being secure in who he is, and also kind of getting some justice after, they attack his daughter, and you know taking taking things into hand and dealing with the situation. And one of the things I always loved about this movie is that when, of course, Riggs gets to fight Joshua, and they fight one on one, and Riggs ends up beating him. But he ends up, the police kind of are going to arrest him or whatever. And he goes for the gun, ends up being both of them, Riggs and Murtaugh shooting him at the same time, and like them being so in sync with each other. It's just one of the like really cool aspects of it too. I really like the way that plays out, and I kind of love that, slow motion bit with the gun smoke, you know, coming out, and the two of them in that pose. It's just kind of a cool, iconic image, and I just always have really liked that neat little trimming to this.
And we talked about the pacing of the movie and the energy. You have to give credit to editor Stuart Baird as well, because he's worked. He worked with Richard Donner on several movies, The Omen and Superman. Worked on the Donner cut as well of Superman 2, uh, and also was editor for Martin Campbell on several films, including Casino Royale. But that editing makes a big difference, and the movie is under 2 hours, and you don't see enough movies that are as tight as this. If you had a movie like that today, it would generally peak over 2 hours, and
Right.
that can be great too. It can be, but I like how tight this movie is. It really works really well for this movie,
Yeah.
and I also love the style of the movie too. Stephen Goldblatt, cinematographer. It just has this really great, energetic look. And I mean to keep bringing up the energy. That's exactly what this movie has. It has a natural, free flowing energy. This sucker moves, um, and it. How about those shots in the desert? Like this epic shot
Yeah.
when you see everybody like coming in on Murtaugh on the horizon, and it's just like, man, they're going for it, aren't they?
Right.
Um, this big, epic sort of shots and energy. Um, Definitely, just a fan of this movie in practically every way. It's easily an A+. I mean, there's there's no question there. It's one of the all time greats. It's a favorite of mine that I'll continually come to, and could be a worthy contender if there's a list of movies to watch always around Christmas time as well. I'd watch it any time of the year, but that's a good excuse to break it out as well. It definitely, like we said, it works as a Christmas movie in the spirit of the season, the spirit of kind of hope and redemption, the spirit of family and togetherness. The whole arc of the movie really works in that favor, and you get a smiley face at the gun range as well.
Right.
And the goofy fun that this movie is also capable of. The Three Stooges energy, like you said, referenced earlier as well. That works in the movie's favor to have that sort of goofy spirit underlying at just the right moments.
Yeah.
that's credit to everybody involved, really, including obviously a terrific script from Shane Black, but you got Richard Donner doing a great job directing it, and Mel Gibson obviously bringing himself into it and his influences, and Danny Glover at risk of falling into holes at all moments. But
Right.
a classic movie. I think it's time we could jump ahead to the second film, Lethal Weapon 2.
Who is it?
Police, open up.
How do I know you're the police?
After I shoot you through the door, you can examine the bullet. Open up.
Mel Gibson, Danny Glover,
Come on, let's go, Raj.
Oh, no, we shouldn't. Let's go. Let's go. Come on, Raj. Don't be a killjoy. Oh, come on, we're back. We're bad. You're black. I'm mad. Come on, man.
Hey, listen. If we're going, shouldn't I have a gun?
No.
Now, get ready for something lethal.
I'm surprised you haven't heard about me. You know, I got a bad reputation. I mean, sometimes I just go nuts like now.
Because the magic
Gun!
is back.
Mark, out the window! No! You all right, man? Yeah, I'm okay. Where were you, man? You my partner or what? Why didn't you follow me down?
Yeah, why don't you follow him down?
Shut up! I'm 7 floors up!
Lethal Weapon 2.
Right off the bat, I'll have to mention that Shane Black is only credited on, of course, the story for the second movie,
Yeah.
along with Warren Murphy, and you have Jeffrey Boehm actually on the script, and that's such a crazy story, and I don't pretend to know all the behind the scenes details and madness, and Shane Black's not been very happy about changes that were made, and allegedly it was so much darker, and we're actually going to kill Riggs, and all these sorts of directions that were bigger and badder. And the truth is, when I watched Lethal Weapon 2, my personal feeling is it's not very different than what a Shane Black movie looks like.
Right.
Even today, I've never seen Shane Black go the big, bad, dark direction that he said that Lethal Weapon 2 was in his version. So I'm not going to say that there wasn't some unheard classic that some people talk about existing that was this, wow, can you imagine this darker version and bigger version, Lethal Weapon 2? If only Shane Black had been left alone and allowed to do what he wanted to do. I think it's apparent in Lethal Weapon 2 that there is some influence of, we're going to make this a franchise and bring out some of those characteristics more.
Yeah.
I think you can get a sense for that, just like not in a way that I don't like, but
Right.
where you can sense the here's a trope, here's a type of gag that they do.
Yeah.
We're gonna bring out the humor at points, but the first movie is funny too. The second movie has probably more humor in it. It does. I mean, it definitely has more humor in it,
Yeah.
but I don't think it ever feels out of place. So that's kind of my first point, is that I think this movie has an excellent script and doesn't feel too different than what I imagine many Shane Black scripts being like.
Right. I think it's it's kind of telling that even though they didn't go with his script, that reading up on it, and you can even tell in the way that the ending is, that they still toyed with the idea of killing Riggs off. And supposedly Donner shot 2 versions.
Yeah.
And of course, the one that tested better was the one where he lived. But I don't think that him living or dying really would change the tone too much in this version. But I'm glad they went with the version they did, because I do think that killing him off just to be dark is not really necessary when the movie's already pretty dark. Even though it has a lot of humor, there's plenty of edge to it. I think that Shane Black kind of says that, they made it way too much comedy, and I think like there's a perfect balance of both. And yes, there's probably more humor in Lethal Weapon 2 than in the first one, and a lot of that comes from Joe Pesci, Leo Getz, that character, and not all of it just comes from that, but he's really uh, a very comedic element of this movie, especially the scene where he's complaining about the drive-through. Just one of the funniest scenes of all time that resonates to this day when you go through a drive-through. Sometimes I think about that rant and agree with it. but but I think the interplay with Riggs and Murtaugh is great in this movie because they are friends, and we don't go through them being at odds with each other as much in this, if at all. Really, they're on the same page, but there's enough interesting things going on, to keep that from being boring. But I do appreciate the humor, especially. I mean, I have to mention the condom commercial because I love that scene when his daughter Rianne is in. They're all excited, got everybody, including her boyfriend, over to watch, and the guy doing construction on their house, uh, and to watch this commercial and not knowing what it is, and it's a condom commercial. Just the humor, the Danny Glover's reaction, like just his response to like Trish, send the kids upstairs, like just his immediate acting response that is so funny. And of course, Riggs, knowing that he's going to get all the people in the precinct to chip in and really rub it in. No, no pun intended. It's just really funny. I love that aspect of this movie. I love the toilet scene,
Yeah.
which is just it might be one of the best scenes in the movie, honestly. Then there's many candidates for that in this one. Uh, I love, but again, that really nothing gets stale. I don't think they like just because people aren't at odds doesn't mean it's stale, and I think they keep the banner and everything pitch perfect, but also they're working together on this plot, which I really enjoyed quite a bit. It's different for especially for back then, in the 80s. And what a summer of 89. I wish I would have been like a teenager adult at that time. I was only 3 or 2, about to be 3. So I didn't, obviously get to go see a lot of those movies. But Batman, Last Crusade, Lethal Weapon 2, all out the same summer. Just an incredible summer of movies there, and that's not even to mention all of them, but 3 of the biggest. And this movie has so much action, so much humor, and such a good story too. And I love the South African angle, the plot. I love the opening scene, like with them getting that chase and finding the Krugerrand, and just the way, again, everything kind of naturally plays out in this. This is very similar to the first one, but not in a way where, oh, this is the first one again. No, it just does what it does so well, like the first one. And it's so natural, and everything is so fast paced and moves so quick. Again, we have very good villains in this, and again, they're not the focus. Joss Auckland is just a great actor in general, and I love him in this. And then just the menace that he kind of portrays, and just a scowl or just his delivery of certain lines. It's perfect. He's also like a diplomat politician that loves to shrug off any consequences for actions. And there's a little bit of satisfaction in the way that he is dealt with in the end, which I guess we'll talk a little bit more about later. And Derek O'Connor playing Vorstead, or Adolf, as Riggs like to call him, is really interesting and kind of fun. I think kind of, maybe they were trying to one up Joshua, and I don't necessarily. I think they're both like equally entertaining henchmen, villains, and just different for different ways. He's a lot more kind of dangerous. He's just very good at what he does, and his taunting of Riggs, especially towards the end, is really um, personal and terrifying. And I like the tension that builds up, because you don't think that this is going to be as personal for Riggs as it is, because with you kind of thinking, oh, this is going to be kind of a more personal movie for Murtaugh, just with the South Africa plot and everything. But it's really personal for both of them for different reasons. I just love the way that it plays out. I think that some people might complain about them adding the Riggs' wife's death to this plot, with him almost stumbling upon their little their little scheme, and them deciding to take action, and they ended up killing her instead with that car accident. Some people might go, "Oh, that's just kind of, ridiculous." And it, maybe it is a stretch, but I think the way that it plays and the way that it works, they make it work. And they make that final kind of stretch when Riggs puts the hat, puts the baseball cap on. Like, never has a baseball cap kind of been so telling of the carnage you're about to see. But like when he's talking to Murtaugh about, we're gonna kill him, uh, I just love that. I love that part, that turn the movie takes. I think without that, and yes, they kill his girlfriend in this movie, Rika, who is like secretary for Joss Auckland's character, and she gets killed after Riggs finally kind of being able to move on from his wife, and who's dead, and try to find some happiness. Ends up getting cut short, and then to find out that they're responsible for his wife's death too. I just think it works, and the payback and the way the action. One of my favorite, I'm just gonna say, like, one of my favorite action finales ever. I just love this whole finale, with them going to the Stilt house to rescue Leo, or at the shipyard. Yeah, I love it. And again, you can see kind of where they definitely played with the idea of killing him off. But I think, like with the decision that they ended up making, like, they didn't originally intend to kill Rika off. They were actually talking about having a scene at the end with Riggs and her going to have Thanksgiving dinner with the Murtaughs at the end of this. So they kind of played different with a lot of different ideas of where to go. I really, this is one of those times I think they kind of picked the right way to go. I think it feels a little more complete with him being alive, but it also ends right there. I'm glad we don't kind of get a immediate, oh, and 2 months later he's feeling great and they're hanging out. Like, I'm glad we don't even get that. I'm glad it ends where it ends. In some ways, I wish this is where the series ended, even though there are things that I enjoy about both of the other ones, even Lethal Weapon 3, I'll admit, even though it's the least of the four. but I do enjoy the other two movies to an extent. But I just feel like this would have been a pitch perfect note to end this series on. But yeah, this is another A plus. I love this one. I it's really hard decision for me if I had to pick between the two of them because they both. I think I lean towards the first one, but man, Lethal Weapon 2 is so good. I think it is one of the not just best action sequel, but it is one of the best sequels of all time, and I think it deserves to be in the same conversation when people say Empire Strikes Back or Godfather Part 2 or this or that, whatever uh, you know, hyperbole you want to use great sequels. I think, or Aliens. I think Lethal Weapon 2 deserves to be in that conversation just as well because man, it is just that good, and it's just such a great continuation of those characters.
And mentioning 1989, how about just 1989 for Jeffrey Boehm?
Yeah,
Last Crusade, the same year. That guy kind of had it going on, didn't he? For
yeah,
that year, especially. But this movie, for all the, I mean, it definitely has darkness in it.
yeah,
But the thing is, just like the first movie uh, brings in humor, the mixture is perfect. The tone is perfect. I don't ever feel like the humor is overbearing or unrealistic or like even bringing in Leo Gatz, which absolutely could have been over the top.
right,
Had every reason that it could have been over the top, but I think it makes sense why they would be tasked with, looking after him and the way that they interact with him and when he does end up being a part of the storyline, it just naturally works with the ebb and flow of the story. Even when they bring him into the embassy to create a distraction, it's perfect and hilarious.
yeah,
That scene is just a classically funny thing. But you're black, like that
you
whole.
you're bleak. Yeah, it's so
It's a
good.
great sequence that goes right into, of course, Riggs breaking in and
Yeah,
shooting some fish and everything. It's a tense but also fun sequence the way that it's delivered.
and more Three Stooge references.
Of course,
Oh, yeah,
plenty of Stooges references in Mo
yeah,
at different points. But yeah, this movie has that balance in a way where you even have a scene on the toilet which could have been played completely for laughs, but has just enough seriousness there where they handle it seriously and you can sense the real dynamic between the characters. Like they pause for a moment before they make the leap into the tub.
right.
That moment where they don't have to say their feelings, and that's exactly true of the way the movie works in general. They don't have to have a heart to heart pause in the movie. We get it. They get it. It works,
Yeah,
and it's all right there in one little tight moment in a sequence that works so well, especially because of everything that happens around it, including to all the other cops here, soon enough, where it's just so
yeah,
intense how fast everybody's taken off. And Murtaugh gets that line of, "Man, I had to miss that poker game because of you,"
right.
uh, where Dean Norris, good old Dean Norris, is blown up.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's just something about the energy here. Like I love the whole sequence where Riggs and the secretary, they're at his place cracking open a beer because he, he doesn't have wine. Uh, there's something like, oh, it's a nice beachfront place. You'll love it. Like great views and yeah, the way he plugs his phone. It's
right.
charming and fun, but that's something else I want to bring up is the fact that speaking of authenticity, it's brought up different points that these guys aren't wealthy.
Right.
They're living on not super high income, and their homes kind of reflect that. They it feels like a real home.
Yeah.
Uh, Murtaugh's home and also Riggs's trailer. Like it's like, oh yeah, that's where these guys would be.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be anything exaggerated. There's something very honest about that, and I I really have a lot of respect for just how much these characters feel authentic all throughout. Lethal Weapon 2, I'm with you in terms of A plus for sure, but just in terms of where it deserves to be in the conversation, it's for me right there with the first movie. It's every bit is good in its own way.
Yeah.
I think it's also interesting that the first movie it's pretty prominent on a refrigerator at the Murtaughs in apartheid, and then in the second movie it ends up playing a significant role. I don't
Yeah.
know that there was any part of them that had that plan in mind, but in terms of where the second story would go if there was a second one,
Right.
but the fact that it's kind of this undertone, it's like a political undertone without needing to overextend itself. Uh, there's a message in there
Yeah.
that is by no means overbearing. This movie just gets its job done and gets out.
Right.
That's part of the praise, but I don't want to constantly just bring up how fast paced it is because I think the point is that it does have that. It manages to have that gravitas and manages to have that character reality underneath. And something else, another detail that I wanted to for sure bring up is I don't think anybody has a hard stare quite as funny as Mel Gibson's.
Right.
Like when they're playing bad cop to Leo Getz when they first meet him, and they're just not having any of it, and they both give him that hard stare. But there's something about just the cold blankness of Mel Gibson in particular that I just think is hilarious, and it comes up a few times where it's just nope, not going to happen. Speaking of this movie having that crazy energy, though, whenever room service arrives and they break out of that window
Oh yeah.
down to the pool, that's one of those super fast paced. Like, holy crap! Now they're falling and they're landing in the pool,
Yeah.
and of course he's slugging Leo in the face, which is another hilarious detail. Like he's not. Of course, he wants to catch the bad guy, but he's not too concerned that he's punching this guy in the face, either. And he can't go after the bad guy because Leo can't swim,
Right.
which is like again something that could be a character that could be overbearing, but that's not unbelievable either. Like it's
Right.
little details like that in the moment make perfect sense. Like of course he might not be able to swim and need some help, and he's just been punched in the face too. So like he, he might need to be assisted in the heat of the moment. So like I definitely have an appreciation for that kind of detail throughout. There's the authenticity only works if you pay attention to details like that nail gun.
Right.
Um,
Oh yeah.
there's so many little moments like that are cleverly handled. It's that Chekhov's gun, principle.
Right.
Um, Once you see it, whatever happened to just a hammer?
Right.
And they set that up in the beginning, and if you're thinking, you're like, oh yeah, that's going to come up later. This is an action movie,
Yeah.
and of course it does, and it's awesome.
Yep. And they also, in a different way, but they play with Riggs having a dislocated shoulder.
Yes.
Um,
Oh yeah, and being and tied up as well. Like
right.
like speaking of a tremendous setup, like we already know he can get out of this.
Yeah. Like and it's kind of a cool detail that that was like kind of showing off for his friends there, and then after they're all killed, like, while he's seeking vengeance for them and for his own losses, um, he ends up doing the same trick to escape
Yeah.
certain death. And um, it's really cool way to do that. Of course, my favorite line in this movie is between Joss Auckland and Danny Glover, of course. Uh, just after he, shoots Riggs multiple times, and of course, just stares at Murtaugh like, you know, what are you going to do about it? And holds up his little wallet, diplomatic immunity, and then we get that neck crack
Yeah.
from Murtaugh. You know what's up then, and he shoots him right through his wallet in his head. Just been revoked. Like, just one of the best line deliveries ever, and like I just love that kind of. It needed that kind of finality. I think it needed that kind of um, coda, especially like with every reveal about Riggs, and then that fight with him and Verstad that was just really cool, and him getting shot like that. We just needed that kind of satisfaction right then, and it just played like his smug, you know, attitude just completely wiped away by Murtaugh is just one of the best parts. I also love the playful way that Riggs drops the cargo trailer on the guy when he like he's just looking at the remote. He's like, "Huh, what's this?" So, like, just the way he's acting when he's about to get attacked from behind and drops it on him, killing him. Like, I just love like the details like that in these movies, but especially in this one. Just both of these movies are so good. They're both right there with each other. Like really cut from the same cloth. Like one day I might tell you I like the first one better, and one day I might tell you I like the second one better. I watched these back to back this time, so it just made it just as hard to decide because I watched them like within the breath of the other. It's really hard for me to pick, so I'm not going to. I think they're both just fantastic movies, and if you want to celebrate this Christmas a little differently, definitely watch Lethal Weapon. If you haven't seen it in a long time, if you've seen it 100 times, if you've never seen it before, unfortunately, if you're listening to this, we may have spoiled a few things, but I don't think that will take anything away. These movies are just so enjoyable. Definitely, give Lethal Weapon a go, and maybe pair it with Die Hard. Watch them back to back. They're both great movies. Uh, if you're one of those people that loves to watch Die Hard at Christmas, um, that's great because I do too. But you know, I also enjoy watching Lethal Weapon at Christmas too. So maybe give it a try and add it to your Christmas action tradition there, and then just watch Lethal Weapon 2 because it's great.
Mentioning the line of dialogue that it's just been revoked reminds me again of how like this Lethal Weapon 2 works as a sequel, like, and you can tell like they're pushing that angle of like, oh, we're gonna have some more one liners and things like that. But the way that they do it always works. Even when he delivers that line, there's almost like a little wink in himself too,
Right.
you know, that he's gonna say something a little cheeky, you know. Um, it's not just look at me being bad, you know. It's
Yeah.
like no, it feels in character still.
Yeah.
Um, in one ear, out the rubber. It's another line that's thrown out there. Uh, this movie, has those kinds of moments in it, but that's exactly the trick is that they work. They've been decaffeinated, like they're
Yeah, yeah. Uh, yeah, I love that phrase they coined in this.
it all works. It
Yeah,
works in the goofy spirit of the movie, like that Three Stoogesness, that the Looney Tunes energy, still balanced with enough hard edged seriousness and character truth
yeah,
that it works. And it makes for a fun ride and a great movie. Um, there's a reason this movie I wanted to do this for our Christmas episode is because yes, absolutely, people need to watch this movie in general, but it's a good choice for Christmas.
yeah,
I think it's worth watching, and if you're gonna watch one, you might as well watch two.
exactly.
They work hand in hand with each other. Um, they're both excellent movies. They both move really fast. The whole series is on HBO
Yeah,
Max. I'm honestly trying to remember: is it on HBO or is it on HBO Max? Because if people that just have regular HBO, do they have it? I'm not 100% sure.
I'm
Um,
not either. I need to investigate that because I have I have a Roku,
yeah.
so I don't have Max on my Roku, but I have it on my PlayStation.
Oh, you should have it on your Roku now. They
Oh,
just
is it
worked
up?
out that deal.
Well, that is wonderful news to me then because I haven't kept up with it. So that's great.
It was the
Uh,
end of last week. They worked out that deal.
well,
There you go.
that's the best
Merry
news
Christmas.
I've, I've been so caught up in other news that's
Yeah.
welcome news. That's great. Um, so I love my PlayStation 4, but I absolutely despise streaming on it. Uh, I I don't know if it's I get so spoiled with the Roku or just how easy it is, but I kind of hate streaming on my PS4. I just like to play games on it. So yeah, that's great. I have to investigate that though. But it definitely is on Max. I own the Blu-rays for all
I
four of
did too.
them, but I watched one and two on Max.
Me too.
Uh,
We
so
did the same thing because I have the
yeah,
four collection and I still watched it on streaming.
um, I'll I don't want to kind of put us in a corner, but kind of getting close to the end of the year here, and I don't know if we'll do the next episode of Lethal Weapon movies like right soon or like a few weeks from now or what, but uh we're kind of at the end of the year just to kind of give people a taste of some things that we're planning on reviewing next year. We've talked a lot, and this might change, but we talked a lot about doing several series and franchises, and so kind of ending and starting the year with Lethal Weapon is a good way to uh, to kind of get started. I'm not going to mention any series or anything like that, but we have several plans for reviews in the pipeline this year. If you've been, listening to our show, we really appreciate you. We've been doing this since this summer, and it's we've definitely kind of learned as we went and upgraded some equipment. Thanks to Jesse, and I feel like that our quality is on an uptake, and I feel like the way that we do our shows is improving. Just with every time we do it, our conversations are you know it's kind of weird to even with somebody that you talk to all the time or have several times, friend, like to frame a discussion when you're, hundreds of miles away from each other and over the internet. So it's kind of different to do this, but I've really enjoyed doing this show, and I'm looking forward to uh, 2021 and all the different things that it will bring along with for the show and for us as people. So happy holidays to everybody. Enjoy Lethal Weapon and Lethal Weapon 2 uh, as part of your new holiday tradition. And I just want to wish everybody a happy new year.
And I'll echo your sentiment. Not only a Merry Christmas to anyone watching and a Happy Holidays in general beyond that, but also just to say that it's been fun doing all these discussions. This is obviously stuff that we love doing. There's so much more that we haven't even begun to do that we'd like to do. Um, Obviously, we've talked about a lot of things that we love, and some things we didn't love so much. And there's so much more range of things to talk about, and I can't wait to kind of open up Pandora's box that much more and have even more discussions, including going into Lethal Weapon 3 and 4,
Yeah.
for what it's worth. Um, that'll be an interesting separate episode, to say the
Yeah.
least, about that before we even get started on it. And different series ideas and themes and ideas that we have moving forward. It's going to be, I think, another excellent year. Time for growth and expansion in what we do on this show. But I'm glad to also to have given you a little Christmas news
Yeah.
that you hadn't been privy to yet about the Roku. I think it literally was for Christmas just because of Wonder Woman 1984. I think that kind of accelerated the conversation and them trying to work out a deal. The fact that there's a big movie landing on the platform on that date, and people that would be upset that they had no access to this big movie,
Yeah.
in spite of perhaps having access to the streaming service.
Right.
But that's how that whole mess goes. A lot of options for streaming out there. HBO Max has so much stuff on it, including the Lethal Weapon series, and uh, lots of chances for movie marathons aplenty
Yes.
across all the different streaming services and beyond. I'm excited to do that as we move forward. In the meantime, just this alone, Lethal Weapon 1 and 2, classic movies, a good way to spend Christmas. And thanks, Drew. Thanks, my friend, for being along with this uh, on this journey with me. It's been a fun thing, and more to come as we go forward.
Well, thank you, Jesse, and it's a pleasure as always. And Merry Christmas to you, and Happy New Year.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody, here in Movie Marathon Mood. We'll see you again relatively soon. Lethal Weapon 3 and 4, and much more. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.